You're very welcome to the polling station. It's back with William Kedjanyi, Johnny Ward, Paul Krishmanurty, and Neil Channing. What a bumper show we have. We've to talk about 5 or 6 different countries today, including the UK, and it is bring your own booze to the polling station today. Did you bring your own booze, William Kedjanyi?
No, because I was not sure. I did not get clearance from the
I thought you were going to say you didn't get the email.
Yeah, I did not get the email and I did not get clearance. So for now, please assume my sobriety.
I can't tell you, Johnny, if I'm bringing my own booze until the report has been completed.
You do look like a man that's ready for a party. You have a haircut of an actor that you're trying to act like someone 10 years younger than you, and it works.
10 years? That's excellent. That's excellent. What do I need to do to make it 12?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Paul Krishmanurty, what do you make of him?
He's looking good. He's looking good. I've already started on the... don't worry about it.
You're busy working from home, Paul, I can tell.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
We're completely the opposite of Boris. Like, we're actually going out of our way to tell people that we're drinking during work, and you're proud of it, Paul.
And obeying the rules critically.
I have a mug here. I'm not going to let you know what's in it. Boris today, though, he was all apologies, William.
Yeah, if you can an apology. I think that might be stretching the Trade Descriptions Act.
What did Christopher Shock call it?
He said to Sam Coates of Sky that it was, and I quote, the most fulsome and abject apology. Now, I promise you I haven't been drinking.
He could have, if he wanted to go a step further, he needed to say, "I'm sorry if you felt offended."
Yes. Which, to be honest with you, Neil's done me a great favour there. That was essentially the Prime Ministerial statement before Prime Minister's questions. He was very, very sorry that you were hurt and that you were upset. And that whilst you were getting shouted at by the Met Police for sitting on a bench during a run in the Royal Parks, he was, as I understand it, wandering into a party that his spokesman claimed that his private secretary set up without his knowledge, staying for 20 minutes and then just going back to work. I mean,
who among us didn't have that during lockdown? Who among us can say that didn't happen to us?
I'm not the Prime Minister, though. Like, I didn't agree with the restrictions in the first place, but I'm not the Prime Minister, and this is the whole thing. How many more things can he get away with, Paul?
I kind of, just quickly though, like, people keep using the expression break the rules. This was break the law. I mean, why do people not say break the law? This was literally the law. And when people talk about, their grandfather's funeral and stuff like that, he obviously doesn't care about that. He couldn't care less about that. If he cared about people dying, he would have done a whole bunch of things different over the last 2 years. But why do people not talk specifically, especially Labour, when they've gone so hard on this? It's one rule for you, one rule for everyone else. Why don't they specifically talk about the people that got fined for breaking the law and had to go to court and bring up that aspect of it? Do you think would that be a bad idea, Paul?
I would go with that. I mean, look, they got it. The High Court ruled today that they broke the law with the COVID contracts, which is personally, I think, a far bigger issue. Whatever Labour's reasoning for doing that, maybe they fear that some of their people might get found to have broken the law as well with regard to COVID rules. I don't know. But so far as Boris is concerned, come on, this is a guy who gave the number of a journalist out to get beaten up, right, and got away with it. Right, he's never thought the law applies to him ever. Right, this is. I mean, one of the most bizarre things right now is people being surprised at Boris Johnson, surprised that he's lying, surprised that he breaks the law. You know, the guy's been doing this stuff in plain sight for 20 years.
But isn't that a lot of that's just faux surprise, isn't it? I mean, that's just nonsense, really.
William, we're going to bring up sort of our best bets to come this year, but Boris is 4-1. To have resigned as Prime Minister by the end of the month, right? So I always thought our markets were a little bit long on him kind of leaving office in the sort of foreseeable future. But by foreseeable future, I may have meant by the end of the year. Leave office by the end of the year is now 4-7, William.
Yeah, and it's a huge swing because literally just a week ago, actually even less than a week ago, you could have got 15-8 and had a decent amount on. So I think we have seen what feels like, and again, this is personal, this is subjective, but what feels like some of the final straws breaking. As an example, today, Douglas Ross has called for him to resign straight out. Tories. I don't think other people as senior in the Tory party will necessarily follow on, but everybody now has sort of reached, I think, the end of their relative tether in the Conservative Party with how much they can take in terms of Johnson blowback. So I think the price is probably fair. There are other things that he's got to deal with as well. Yes, okay, this story is here and now, but going on down the line, is he really going to be the guy to keep the Conservative image up during a massive cost of living crisis and inflation, etc.? Is that going to be sort of his mantra? Is that sort of prime minister or politician he is? I don't really think so.
Yeah, and Neil, I was like, with my understanding of British politics, I was asking you guys last year what needs to happen for this to unravel, because it looked like Boris was kind of losing his edge, but it almost looks like the last month or two, Neil, that like he's almost just not able to actually deal with this. His own performance seemed to be crumbling as well.
Well, from a gambling point of view, I find that it's quite interesting in terms of recency bias, because we had the cheese and wine party thing before Christmas, and he went into even money to be gone by the end of 2022. They then lost the North Shropshire by-election, which was a massive, okay, the Lib Dems were backed into favouritism.
It was a collapse in vote, though.
But it's a huge collapse in the vote. And in the early betting, the Lib Dems were like 3-1 to win that. Despite those two things happening, the day before yesterday, he was about 2-1 to go this year. And today he's currently, I think he's about 4-6 now. I think Star Sports are 4-7
with Star Sports, yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder what it was that the people that are backing him at 4-7 now, when you could have backed him at, I don't know, you could have easily got 7-4 12 hours ago, when the news of the email had leaked. We had a lot of people were kind of rubbing their hands overnight and saying, oh, PMQs are going to be really exciting tomorrow. I think Keir Starmer did pretty well at PMQs today, and I don't say that very often. And I don't think Boris Johnson did a great job at PMQs, but you have to remember that PMQs is only watched by a couple of 100,000 people. Obviously, the news channels pick up on PMQs and show clips of it and whatever throughout the evening. But most people in the general public won't be really aware of what's happening in PMQs. It's very unlikely that PMQs is going to be the thing that brings him down. But it seems like because of PMQs, more than because of the leaked email, he's gone from 7-4 to 4-7 to go this year. It seems like too much recency bias. We knew the email was leaked yesterday when he was 7-4. What do we know more than that today to make him 4-7? Do you think it's an overreaction, Paul? You're very much on Boris to go.
I agree with you completely that it shouldn't have drifted back. I don't think it was PMQs. I think it's just been a trail over the last 24, 36 hours. If you look at the Betfair price, it was like 2-1. And then about 24 hours ago, it had gone down to 11-10, having briefly touched odds on. It went out a little bit again. And then it came in more overnight. And I think it's just people waking up to the story, to be honest, and realising.
But it seems weird, doesn't it? We think that the markets are quite clever on these things. How do they have to wake up to it? There's no real new information in the last 8 hours.
It feels like we've gone from one scandal to 24 scandals, and this has just been going on and on and on.
It's because there is a mismatch between those of us who engage, how quickly we're getting stories, I think, on Twitter and whatnot, and the average punter. Going back, just taking this back to before Christmas, I absolutely agree with what Neil said. It's bizarre how that drifted, because he was into even money before North Shropshire. Right now, that was when the sort of median opinion was it will be a dead heat in North Shropshire. It could go either way. They got trounced. That's about the worst by-election result I can ever remember.
What did they poll, like 63% the last time there was an election there or something like that?
Yeah, it's truly astonishing. And, you know, just proving that, you know, anyone saying this doesn't matter, this doesn't cut through is just talking rubbish, right? And we know, as Will said, we know that 2022 has a massive cost of living crisis ahead of it. There's no good news on the horizon for Boris Johnson. So I could not see why he drifted out again. And I've just been going in again and again and again on him to go before 2024 and for 2022. And I can't see him surviving.
But at this current price now,
it's a great bet.
If you had to guess whether you'll see 2 to 5 before you see 8 to 11 again, or 4 to 5, you'd guess 4 to 5, wouldn't you?
I like that philosophy with horses as well. On what sword does he fall, William? Would you predict? Is it a revolt from within that is just like, because the Conservatives are on a one-way train to nowhere at the moment, and somebody has to step up and say, it's in my political interest to actually just make a heave here?
I read something good from, I want to say Matthew Holhouse of The Economist earlier, who sort of reminded everybody that with Anne-Marie Morris losing the whip today, the line is 54 letters in to 1922. But the bar for Johnson to, I think, lose that no confidence vote, and if he was to survive one, it's another year until they can call one again. That was the case, I believe, for Theresa May, if I remember correctly. It's 108 or so. There's a difference. There's still a little difference, I think, quite a way to go before you get that many MPs on side. That said, I am confident that at least that many MPs are considering it. I've got
a couple of thoughts on this, actually, and I don't know, I'd be interested in your opinions on it. I think if you're somebody that's a fan of either Rishi or Liz Truss, who are definitely the massively the two contenders, I think, you know, they should be kind of 6 to 1 on between them, I think, coupled, and they're not, you know. I really don't see it being anyone else other than those. But if you're a person who supports either of them, you don't really want either of them to come in right now. There's so much more horrible stuff coming up for the Tories.
Wait.
No, I know we're going to talk about that, but what I was going to say from the point of view of Boris leaving is that you might think to yourself, if you're an ERG member thinking about writing a letter to the 1922 committee, you might think to yourself, I want to save my job. But what has happened in all of this is that the price on an election being held in 24 has firmed right up, and 23 has drifted right out. So now we've got quite a bit of time. We need to use this time to dump as much of this mess, the cost of living crisis, the energy prices, the fiscal drag, you know, because of inflation, and you know, this is causing extra problems on people's cost of living. Let's dump it all on Johnson as much as we can, so that when our man or our girl comes in, we can have a fresh start.
That's a very valid point, Paul. And if you were on the side of Labour for the last while, basically being in, you know, next in government or whatever, you're kind of wondering, we need Boris to stay in this as long as possible.
Labour definitely want that. That would make perfect sense. But I don't really agree. I only partly agree with what Neil was saying. I think it depends on who the candidate is. And I think that there's far more, as in all matters British politics, there's far more to it than what we're seeing, right? Boris Johnson, regardless of the party scandal, right, which obviously they all knew about in May 2020. I mean, let's not pretend that other Tory MPs didn't know anything about it, or the police didn't. The police who were in Downing Street every day didn't know anything about it. Or Laura Koonsberg and Robert Peston didn't know anything about it. Of course they did, right? But what we have seen ever since last spring was Dominic Cummings, that most sinister of characters who people will not ask the right questions about, openly trying to destroy Boris Johnson, right? Doing it absolutely in plain sight. And we saw possibly the #1 rival to Rishi Sunak, right? Matt Hancock, destroyed in an extraordinary event that no one has explained how someone got in that office and flipped the cameras around, right? And
I'd actually forgotten about that. So much has happened since. That should be so fresh in the memory.
They've skirted over it, haven't they? Right
Mm.
now, I'm saying that Dominic Cummings is what we're seeing is a good old-fashioned coup, the likes of which we would have seen in the Soviet Union, where Dominic Cummings, of course, spent a lot of time in the ex-Soviet Union in the 1990s and made a lot of contacts.
Can someone throw Michael Gove out of the window?
Well, hang on. Who is Dominic Cummings? His best friend of old, Michael Gove. Who did Dominic Cummings elevate suddenly, dramatically, in the middle of a general election campaign to taking Theresa May's place in a prime ministerial debate? Rishi Sunak, who was elevated suddenly, dramatically, to becoming Chancellor of the Exchequer before Sajid Javid even got to deliver a budget. Rishi Sunak. And when Dominic Cummings gave his evidence in Parliament, who did he completely leave out of any criticism? Rishi Sunak and Michael Gove. Right? Now, I think if I'm Rishi Sunak, I do not want to be Chancellor of the Exchequer in April.
No, I agree.
Right? Liz Truss, who probably promoted by Boris even maybe as someone more on his side of this, she probably does want to play the long game. But I think Sunak wants the job. They want Sunak in the job now.
The main danger for the ERG people in terms of what they think about Sunak relative to Johnson is that they don't like that Johnson is a tax and spend kind of guy, and they want to go back to a more Thatcherite, smaller state, less borrowing. But I think now they feel like they've clipped his wings. He's just got to do whatever they say now, so they don't have to worry so much about that anymore because because Johnson's got so much less political capital now.
Mm.
Yeah,
somebody does need to take the blame in April, and if I'm Rishi Sunak, I don't want to be in that job.
No, I agree.
Is there
so we think he goes before the summer then?
I think within days.
Within days.
Really? Okay.
I think we're in a situation where
he's forced before the end of the month.
I would. Well, at the odds, I prefer the end of March at 5-2.
Okay.
And that assume that doesn't involve like the interim leader after resigning thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just that he resigns, right?
No. I imagine we would set payout on the letter and the declaration in public.
Yeah. So I think where we are is we're in a moving situation where I think that definitely a lot of Conservative MPs and commentators have become very complacent and taken a lot of things for granted about the ability to reset. And events are catching up with them. And what we're in a situation with is rather like, to give you a long-term historic example, Ian Duncan Smith and the way they got rid of him, in that it just dawned all of a sudden, this isn't something we can leave till next summer. It isn't something that can wait. And suddenly the donors abandon him and the more and more backbenchers start speaking out. And whether or not he can win a vote of confidence or not, the fact that he's uncertain to win a vote of confidence means it's time up.
Yeah,
and
okay. If everyone's in agreement that sort of Boris's time is now, William, I'm just interested in Labour here. Has Sir Keir Starmer sort of capitalised on this? And are Labour afraid of what sort of a mess they might inherit if they come into power in due course?
To answer question one, I thought it was very good today. And I have been pretty vocal in, I wouldn't want to say criticism, I think I've been fair, but just in sort of pointing out that Starmer is, I think, best for somebody who has the time to build a repeated case as his background would befit. But he was very good. I felt he did capitalise on it today. I've heard some people saying that they didn't think he was all that. I don't understand where it's coming from. I'm not a Starmer fan. But if there was an open goal, he went round the keeper and he scored 6.
Okay.
In my opinion. So capitalise, yes. Labour haven't yet capitalised, I don't think, structurally on the Tory issues. I think structurally that's difficult in this country for a number of reasons. I don't think we're going to get back to New Labour heydays, right, where their polls are going surging up. But they're in a much better place now, polling wise. I think they are probably about ready-ish to strike. What they need is their own agenda, and they need, I think, some clear and defining policies and a theme to tie around this year. But these scandals, they might do one thing for them, which is they might just buy them more time, because we are in the middle of Omicron and the wave, and we're in the middle of the Partygate, and then we've got the cost of living crisis. You know, it does give them a bit of breathing space. They don't have to be out there telling people what the Labour government would look like from tomorrow. And I know that Starmer did give that speech earlier on, and I thought it was a good bit of initiative, even if the wrong day was chosen. But generally speaking, decent, healthy position. In terms of what mess they might inherit very quickly, it's not likely to be pretty, but we don't know what it's going to be like because...
Or when.
Yeah, I'm still presuming it's 2024 for the next election. If there's one thing I would say, it's that I think fundamentally, just inherently, even though I'm not sure what the public would say when polled about it, the Labour Party is filled full of people who would be more serious about governing and data.
The bar is low.
It's very low, but they would be. But that's something for down the line.
Yeah, okay, we'll get to France shortly. Neil, I have to ask you though, Tony Blair's knighthood, that must have been something you celebrated in recent days.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I did sign the petition.
I thought you might.
I think they got to 1.1 million people. I didn't really think of it as a particularly major issue. They didn't offer me one; I would have turned it down.
So would I. But it's not imminent at the moment. The French election is next. To get to France, we have to get to the States. I think it's all heading towards Boris Trump again. Bit of Australia as well. Novak Djokovic somehow wrapped up in Oz politics. Okay, next French presidential election, and we've a bit of Italy as well. Mario Draghi and Silvio Berlusconi. It must be 150 at this stage. Anyway, not the price.
Oh my God, is this a 2-hour special? How are we
this is the thing. When Neil Shannon comes on, brevity is never the soul of your beautiful wit. So I have to compress the show into Macron 94. Pécresse, who's like, again, 7-2 kind of, law and order right. Marine Le Pen 9-1. Eric Zemmour's 14-1. William, this is quite a depressing election. I'm sure, Neil isn't going to disagree on this. Polls would suggest that Pécresse is actually a bit of value at 7-2. Macron 4-9.
I see it. I see Pécresse. I see the argument. I see the polling recently.
I think she'd be the first woman president. Is that right?
The first president of the Republic to be a woman. And yeah, I have to say, you could give her a right shake, probably better than 7-2. Close to the time, I'd be hopeful that we would have markets on somebody to reach the second round, which will essentially be a sort of 2-horse race, because Macron definitely will. But you might get, say, evens outside of him. And Pécresse could be the bet by then. Her campaign appears to be going well. She has a lot less of the unlikability of, say, Zemmour, and a lot less of the baggage of a Marine Le Pen. It's pretty easy to see how she could take on Macron. There's definitely an anti-Macron feeling. There always has been. Every French president, more or less, has to deal with the fact that there's a sort of great coalescing of opposition to them by the time it comes to the re-election, and I don't see why Pécresse can't go close.
Paul, I see a total tide towards the left in the next 10 years in European politics, purely because of climate change in general, but it's not happening in France at the moment.
I'm not necessarily. I can see what you're saying about climate change, and I think that the Greens are probably going to usurp the left, so to speak. But I don't necessarily think that. I think there's more. This nationalist wave has still probably got more to go. Although, having said that, all that said, there's a lot of uncertainty in France. A lot of uncertainty, because first of all, look at past campaigns. Lots of crazy stuff happens once the debates start. Right now, at the moment, the left is doing what the left always does and splitting. Right. But I have read over the last couple of years a lot of talk amongst French leftists that they get it. They get it. It's too serious this time. Democracy's on the line, right? They have to unite around someone. And originally, I have backed Yannick Jadot at 250-1. just as a little flyer, because can't the Green candidate have a good campaign, end up as the leading leftist, and then unite around him and abandon Melancon? But I still won't be surprised at all if at some point during those campaigns, the left candidate whoever one of the left candidates ends up as in contention for a top two. So there could be some trading value there. I would say, even though I think Macron will win, and I'm inclined to think he's a good bet because he's likeliest to come up against Marine Le Pen, which would be a no contest, Macron could get imploded. You know, a lot of the people who support Macron are ex-conservatives, right? Or centre-right people. So if Pécresse runs a good campaign, could she steal some Macron voters, and suddenly you end up in a Pécresse-Macron contest? So there is a lot of uncertainty. I do think he's probably a solid bet at 4-9, but you know, the main thing is it won't be one of those far-right candidates. They won't win. Le Pen and Zemmour won't win. Do their support wide up.
It is 3 months away now.
Yeah, last time round, Macron beat Le Pen 64-36, and it was a very typical French election in that the heads up presented a situation where lots of people kind of reluctantly voted for Macron because they just didn't want to see a fascist as their president. So it gave us an over-exaggeration of how popular Macron is. And obviously, you know, he's had some opposition from, you know, the Gilets jaunes and stuff in the early days, but just generally, he's not that popular. It's a funny country, France, politically, because it's a bit sort of Brexity in that there are whole swathes of the kind of rural France that are happy to vote far right, and obviously there are major population densities in the cities that are much more likely to vote for other kinds of characters, but they don't really have anyone to vote for. I find Mélenchon an interesting politician. You know, he's quite sort of anti-EU, and he's kind of far left in some ways. They haven't really had the opportunity, the French electorate, to vote for a sort of, inverted commas, normal lefty, not an extreme left winger, and someone that was comfortable with the EU. You know, the more sort of centre left of French politics has just completely died in the last 5 years. I don't know, wasn't it this time? It was around this time, wasn't it, last time round, that Fillon was still quite a short price, and the whole market changed completely, though, wasn't it, Paul?
It's around this time, yeah, over a scandal.
So, you know, even like 3 months out, things can change quite a lot.
Absolutely, exactly, right, yeah.
Mario Draghi 2-5 in Italy, Paul, and Berlusconi 6s, Cassini is 8. And I was just talking pre-show, Berlusconi obviously massive ties to Milan and AC Milan and so forth in the media. I thought he was dead, not actually in the grave. I thought he's politically dead. I'm not following this, and he pops up at 6-1.
I don't think he's got a prayer. I don't think he's got the numbers. This is determined by senators and parliamentarians, and I don't think he has the numbers. The Five-Star Movement will be critical in deciding this, and they have suggested they would support a couple of women. I think I haven't got it in front of me. Is his name Maria Carabatti? Is that in the investment? Yeah. So she's possible, but I'm inclined to think that it will be Draghi, because the markets are terrified of Draghi going, and I just think in the weeks ahead enough pressure will be brought to bear to say you've got to go with stability.
William?
Yeah. I would agree with what Paul said. I think the stability factor is probably going to weigh massively down. I might go as far as to say, if that sort of price is your thing, a Draghi Macron double or something like that could be something to go for. It's not too long to wait. That would be if you think Macron is an absolute cert to go over the line. I think Draghi would probably be the better bet than Macron.
Briefly, are you getting involved here, Neil?
I've not even looked at this one, to be honest with you. I do think in France, I don't think Macron was a bad bet at 1-2. I think he can shorten from here.
Can I give you an accumulator? Can I give you an accumulator?
Let's save it till the end of the show.
Okay. All right.
Let's save it. So we have Neil admitting he hasn't looked at the market, Paul admitting that he's having a drink, William being William, and well, I'm just a shambles from start to finish.
Italian politics is a kind of reality TV show. I didn't know we were doing it.
It absolutely is. And speaking of which, the US election, we have to talk about 2024. William, it all looks like Trump for me. He more or less has a Conservative Party basically in his hands, short of him getting done for all sorts of stuff in the courts, which to me is the problem. I can't see who's going to actually win on the side of his rivals here, because effectively Biden's not going to win the next election if he stands. We have basically a vice president who's not doing a very good job here and hasn't impressed at all. So we need somebody on the Democrat side to beat Trump. I think Donald Trump at 3-1. Who's going to? I'm giving it away. That's my bet for politics. I think Donald Trump 3-1 to win the next election is going to happen.
I agree, and I think it works whether you're a fixed odds man or you want to trade. If Trump wins nomination, and if it's just a purely polling thing, I think if he stands and he goes, he wins. Save for some extraordinary event, which is basically legal or natural
or death.
Yeah. But he seems to be just fine from what I am seeing, and I think he'll listen. If he gets there, if he runs, you're not getting 3-1 post midterms. You're not getting anywhere close to it, I don't think. And if he gets the nomination, he's a 5-4 shot, and I think that's very fair. I mean, he should be way shorter than that on the polling. Way shorter than that on the polling. I think you'd be very happy. I think if you're willing to wait that long, that's the angle in for me.
And Paul, we're talking about I'm talking about a hypothetical or notional swing to the left, and then I'm talking about Donald Trump somehow getting re-elected. And I'm even reading Maureen Dowd recently in New York Times, serialized in the Times, listing that he's actually, in terms of his performance as president, he actually did better than what Biden has done so far. In terms of Biden's just so unfulfilling presidency so far.
I'm not convinced, actually. I mean, well, there's two things to that. Right? First of all, I do think the Democrats are in massive trouble. And I think that the bet is Republicans to win the election, whoever the Republican candidate is. Personally, as someone who is very sympathetic to Joe Biden's agenda, I'm perfectly happy with him. I think he's doing a fine job.
Doing a good job on COVID, so on and so forth?
Well, considering you have a country where 32% of the country is completely radicalised. Right, and won't do that. I think he's doing a good job on Ukraine at the moment. I think there's an absolute agenda to not report things going on, like in bailing out Europe with gas in the last few weeks and saving a disaster. So, and I like his agenda. I like his child tax credits agenda, his free school meals agenda. But I do appreciate that the Democrats are in trouble because for 4 years they were able to build a coalition against Trump, and that's easy. Now they've got to do it in government. And I think, as you saw in Virginia, take Trump off the ballot and suddenly the Republicans are way ahead again. Now, this is why I am massively sceptical about Trump. I think, on the one hand, he's insane. He's been going insane, further insane for many years, right? And he really is just a mad old geezer walking around his club telling everyone he was robbed, right? Now, I think that because in polls, he's going to show up well because people aren't thinking seriously about it yet. It's only 2022, right? And there's just a general good feeling towards him amongst a lot of Republicans. But when he endorses candidates locally, they don't always win, right? Now, we've got a big test of that coming up in Georgia, where he is going after Brian Kemp, who is a very far-right governor, right? But Brian Kemp doesn't endorse the big lie about the election, and nor does a vast majority of Americans. And there's a lot more to play out on that. There's a lot more to play out on that, court cases, revelations, etc. And I think that Kemp will defy Trump in Georgia, win the Republican nomination, which, again, putting a big hole in this idea that Trump is impregnable. And I think that ultimately the people behind the Republican Party, the money behind them, will decide that he's a bad bet, that they would be better off either picking a Ron DeSantis, right, who's got a very good chance, But I stick with Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is Trump, but younger, more competent, backed by the same people, same far-right rhetoric, same ability to infuse the base, same non-politician, anti-politics, celebrity backing. And when he visited Hungary last year to present his show in Budapest for a week, that was the signal, right? That's to go and get the endorsement of Orban, Semyon Mogilevich, Vladimir Putin, etc., right? And Russia Today run Tucker Carlson stuff all day long, just like they ran Trump stuff all day long for years. So I would go that way. I'd say back the party, back the Republicans, and look for an outsider like Tucker Carlson.
We're over under 7.5 Russia mentions from Paul at the moment. That's just present odds. I think we're at 4 at the moment. Neil, this is incredibly depressing, though. Listen to this. Like America, stood up as this country that we should all be proud of and look up to basically all my life until recent times. It's becoming an absolute laughingstock at the moment, and this is what we're left with.
Yeah, it's very depressing. I saw something the other day about the big lie. They were saying that a lot of American Republican politicians are too scared to say that they don't go along with the big lie because too many nutters threaten their life. So you kind of.
It's not long since
I don't know whether you saw the Ted Cruz interview the other day with Tucker Carlson, where he had to totally back down and humiliate himself yet again. But no, it's very depressing. I think at the prices. If you wanted to have a trade, I think if you bet Trump now and then revisit it in November, I think you'll be in good shape and you'll be able to get yourself a free bet.
If we go to Australia, the Scott Morrison thing, William's been fascinating as a sports reporter. I'm not really particularly interested.
Well, I mean, you never said we were going to Italy and Australia. What the hell's going on? This is
William has just down on my list of things to get through.
You want to do like a 3-hour show?
We're nearly there. The Scott Morrison thing is fascinating because I think Djokovic's views on vaccines are a bit mad. The whole kind of Serbian thing, very, very questionable as well, and talking to an Aussie journalist who brought up the Serbs and they were happy to throw a punch and all this. Not a big fan of Djokovic. Same time, he's treated as a complete pariah, but he gets himself bang in the middle of a bit of political pawn games as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is absolutely wild, I have to say. It's just one of the most bizarre stories I've seen, not in the sense that it's happened. There will always like to be issues, in some sports there are pretty low rates of vaccinations, but just the sort of drama around it and the sheer sort of scale of the saga and the way everybody's leapt onto this. I mean, this was always going to happen sooner or later with Djokovic. He's always had this stance, and I remember he hosted that classic like in the first wave. And he hosted that classic when I think a lot of people say, is this a really good idea? And a load of people, I think, got COVID from it. I think he might have gotten it from it once. I'm not sure that his PCR, the supposedly positive PCR, was his first positive test.
I heard something about him the other day where he quoted a study where 2 glasses of water had people shout and swear at one of them and speak nicely to the other one over a month, and the glass of water that people shouted and swore at developed some kind of it sort of turned rancid or something, and whereas the other one was pure water by the end, and he genuinely believed that.
I've got to see that link. I've got to see that link in the Post show. I really have. If it's not going anywhere else, it's got to go in Brainworms at the very least.
As you say, though, it's so much going on. The Djokovic thing, the fact that he wants to be the best tennis player of all time in terms of records, the US kind of antagonism towards him, the fact that it's shone a light on how migrants are dealt with as well when they end up in Australia, ending up in this absolute squalor. The fact that now he's trying to basically get out of the fact that he appeared after an event when his lawyers say he had COVID, and we have an Aussie election coming up.
Yes, we do. And that's, I think, playing a big part in this. I don't want to say that it is the sole reason behind the backlash. I think there is a bit of opportunism in the sense that you have the right breeding grounds for these sort of conditions. So Australia, the most penal conditions during not just with borders, but also just in general with your daily lives. Everything, time outside, access to public spaces, hoops you have to jump through for expats to get back, etc. You got 18 months of that. You've got a very rich and favoured sports person who, at the very least, has been pretty wet on vaccinations or whatever, who appears, I think, to have sort of a Machiavellian streak, if you really dig in. And then suddenly, just imagine how expensive has it been to get your auntie or your mum or your sister or family friend back. And Djokovic is just going to come right in, despite having not been vaccinated, to go and play in a tennis tournament, one which he's likely to win and likely to win lots of money for. It's the perfect recipe to make people extremely mad. In a way, a mirror of what we've got here. And of course, politicians will sort of go and run with it. I think there has been definitely, I don't want to say necessarily opportunism, but there has been a bit of a political strategy here.
Totally.
Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of this, and if that means just using the same very tough border policies that you've had, then yeah, absolutely. But that said, it appears that Djokovic is going to play. It appears that the government got their posturing in, and we will see what happens throughout.
From Novak to no dry January, Paul Krishnamurty. I'm going to start with you for your bet of the year.
I'm going to go, well, if we'd done this a week ago, I'd have just been all in on Boris. Right?
You can't say that. I'm saying the exact same thing myself. We didn't do this a week ago, so it's it's obsolete. Come on.
Instead, we've got an accumulator. We're just going to go for an accumulator, okay? 47 Boris to go this year. Macron, Draghi, and then I'm going to have it all. Well, that's the year, but if you want, I want to also have it all running on to the best odds on better than lot.
I know what you're going to say.
2 to 5 Keir Starmer to still be there in 2024.
Beautiful.
Oh, that wasn't what
I'm not sure that market's still there, actually, but yeah. I thought he was a great bet to be the next PM back in the day.
Yeah, I don't think we're having an election until 2024. There's no way Labour are going to get rid of their leader before the election now. It's too late.
Okay. There might be a slight kind of, what's that when we have contingency that the markets kind of slightly are related to each other, but William...
Correlated.
William, what's yours?
I've got two, and I'm going full Kedjanyi for this one, because I'm, of course, ignoring every single major election this year and going for the one that really counts. Next BBC political editor. I'm splitting stakes.
You can throw this into Paul's accumulator, actually.
Well, generally, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've got two. I don't know if it's slightly head or heart, but I think you can make the case for both of them. This is actually
Carrie Murphy. Carrie Johnson.
Carrie Murphy.
Carrie Murphy.
Love it.
Once again, it's Carrie Murphy.
Still paid out.
This won't go in Paul's accumulator because, if I remember correctly, you've backed Sopel. Mm-hmm. No. Oh, you have.
Yeah, I have that one.
First one is Vicky Young at 11-4. She is the second favourite, one of the two big ones. The case, I think, makes itself. She's been at the corporation for a long time, very successful career, quietly moved through the ranks, deputy political editor now, very much well respected without people having to say it. There is not really anybody with a bad word to say about Vicky Young, and her controversy list is exceptionally short for somebody who's held that position during the time which she has. It would appear to be a pretty natural progression for her to go up one rung. She's filled in for Koenigsberg a lot. She has experience at 4 general elections, the last 4, and played a big part in all of them. She's already got everything running there. She's got the team, she produces the packages, she guests, she's been on newscasts a lot. The BBC are very into the multimedia range now. She's doing plenty of that. And as another bonus, or another 2 bonuses, number 1, she is a woman. I think that they might be inclined to follow a woman political editor with another woman. Certainly that's been mentioned in some media circles. And number 2, she isn't, as an appointment, obviously going to upset anybody. And what do Tim Davie and Deborah Turnus, recently appointed from ITN, what do they want? Some bleeding peace and quiet. That they do not want to be going in and fighting a battle over the next political editor. And the government is going to have their say. And I cannot think they'd find anything massively wrong with Vicky Young. The second, bit bigger, Alex Forsyth. She's about 14-1 or so. This will be a bigger step up because she's a political correspondent, but it's not as if she doesn't have any responsibility. She's the political correspondent outside of London, going all across the country. She's been doing this for a couple of years now. And if the BBC wanted to prove that it knows about life outside London, which is definitely something that the government's put massive pressure on it to do, and to be fair, rightly so, who better than the woman who has basically been tasked with going to each and every corner of the country? She's got stints, plenty of big stints, education, Middle East, previously a junior political correspondent. She's been trusted enough to host plenty of big things. She was covering for Joe Coburn on Politics Live recently. And again, wouldn't be a big upset. It wouldn't be a big upset. And you look at the sort of moving pieces, and I'll finish very shortly, but you have Adam Fleming as the newscast host. Mason's already got Any Questions. Rajan's got Today programme. Those are three of the biggest ones. Goodall's got Newsnight, and also if Goodall is appointed, then you know that you might as well just sell the BBC off to Murdoch now. That is what the government will eventually end up doing to it. Otherwise, they'll have the SAS storm the place. And outside of that, most of the leading market contenders are all outside of the BBC. And Beth Rigby, and this is great news, by the way, has just recently got her own new show with Sky. So who becomes big enough? The two lurking threats, I said, are Sopel, who may just want to break anyway, and then Faisal Islam, who used to be Sky's political editor, is very good, but again, big year for economics. Does he necessarily want to give the job away? It is well paid. It's not as if he'd be doing nothing.
Beat that, Neil Channing.
Well, I can't really. I can't give you half an hour on some market that nobody cares about. I can't believe you.
Nothing virtual about a winner, like.
You told me a list of things that we had to think about for today, and then you've come out with Australia and tennis, and then Italy. I thought you were going to talk about UK by-elections. There's a whole bunch of those in the pipeline, I think. But the first one we'll get of the year is actually quite boring. Birmingham Erdington. Jack Dromey just died, and he became the MP there in 2010 with a majority of 3,200. Labour have held the seat since 1945. He had a 5,100 majority in 2015, 7,300 in 2017. I was amazed to see that prior to the 2019 election, he could have got 4 to 9 him to win the seat. He won it with a majority of 3,600. And now he's going to be, Labour are going to be about 16 to 1 on to win that by-election. So I guess that's going to be a bit boring. I thought Paul was going to tell us that he had a great bet in Brazil, where they have an election in the summer. So I'm going to take that as my bet. I think I'll have Lulu de Silva. He would have won last time, except for he got arrested on a trumped-up charges of corruption. And now he's standing against the judge who put him away, which is ludicrous, really. Bolsonaro has been disastrous in terms of COVID. The country has all kinds of problems anyway in the economy. And we're seeing a slight crimson tide in South America. In Chile recently, the centre-left candidate beat the far right. And obviously, Venezuela's a communist country. We have Bolivia has moved to the left, and Mexico. So you know, it's starting to feel like, to an extent, the CIA have got other things on their mind other than stopping. I think they might feel like, do we prefer the risk of a slight centre-left government in Brazil? Or a bloke that wants to burn down the rainforests.
And is doing so
as long as the
rate.
CIA don't decide to stop the election, which I don't think they will this time, but for that reason.
They were never against him. America were never against Lula, right? Lula's a safe centre-left.
Yeah, I agree. He's centre left. He's not extreme.
They never tried to undermine him in the first place. Right? You know, he was always
he
there.
He did end up in prison though. So
yeah, but only because the far right in Brazil, who have a great deal of institutional power, did it. It wasn't like this. I think that if you look at the Betfair market, they've got massive odds on Lula, right? Because there's this assumption that there'll be violence and the right wing will stop them. But there's no way Biden won't back Lula. And there's no way the EU won't.
No, I agree. I think, especially because of climate change, and I think you can bet him at about 4 to 6 now on polling. If you just looked at polling and it was a country that wasn't Brazil, and you saw the polling and said, "How do you think they'll bet?" You'd say it'd be a 3 to 1 on, 4 to 1 on. So I think 4 to 6 is a really good bet.
I'm going to wrap up the show now and just say that Donald Trump 3 to 1 is my bet, and just keep an eye out for the next few weeks. I think William and I are going to come up with a market on the Northern Irish elections, which are not long away at all. Sinn Féin polling much the highest in not only the south, but about to basically provide the first minister from Green side in Northern Ireland. The DUP is in tatters. No awful lot going on in Northern Ireland. It's even more of a basket case than it normally is. But Sinn Féin quietly making into the biggest party north and south. What are the repercussions for United Ireland betting, and what are the repercussions for politics in Ireland? That was the polling station, lads. Thanks a million for coming on.
Thanks, Johnny. Pleasure.
And we shall be back next week.